Humanity's first warship, Unity, had been silently constructed in orbit above Earth, a project so secret that even the most powerful governments were unaware of its existence. The ship was a colossal marvel of technology, its hull gleaming with metallic silver and shimmering energy fields that flickered with quiet brilliance beneath its surface. It had taken decades of research and innovation to perfect the systems that now ran within it, yet it was more than just a ship. It was the embodiment of humanity's will to rise above its past, its failures, its fragile beginnings, and now it was ready to announce its presence to the galaxy. For centuries, humanity had been treated as insignificant by the greater galactic powers. The older civilizations regarded Earth as little more than a curiosity, a species barely worthy of interaction, and certainly not one that would ever be invited to join the Galactic Council, a body of ancient races that had ruled the stars for eons. The Council's decisions affected everything from trade routes to the fates of entire planets, and humanity had been left out entirely. Earth's technology had remained rudimentary until the discovery of alien artifacts buried deep within the planet's crust, artifacts that had been hidden for millennia, and which had provided humanity with a spark of knowledge that would propel them into the stars. The first real signal from Earth had been sent years ago, a peaceful transmission that introduced humanity to the galactic community and sought to establish relations, but the Council had dismissed it as the naive gestures of a species unworthy of serious consideration. And that dismissal had only fueled the fires of ambition and defiance within Earth's leaders. They would no longer ask for permission, no longer beg for acceptance. They would take their place in the stars or die trying. Now the message sent by Unity was simple and stark, and it would be heard across the galaxy. With or without the Council's approval, humanity was no longer begging, it was taking the power to forge its own destiny. And that meant shaking the very foundations of the cosmic order. In the control room of Unity, the crew watched in silence as the message was broadcast. The faces of the commanders were a mixture of anticipation and determination. Their hands hovered above controls that could alter the course of history. With a single command, a holographic map of the galaxy flickered to life across the room, and the ship's destination was clear: the heart of galactic space, the seat of the Council's power. The transmission sent by Unity was not a declaration of war, but a statement of intent. It was not a threat, but a challenge. The message spoke only one line, and it burned its way into the minds of all who received it, from the edges of the galaxy to the great Council's homeworld itself. We are no longer your servants, prepare to meet us. The silence that followed was deafening across the stars. It was a moment that would change everything, for humanity had just taken the first step toward a future no one had anticipated. The galaxy stirred in shock as the message from Earth echoed through the vast network of stars. The Galactic Council could not ignore it, no matter how much they wished to dismiss the humans as an insignificant threat. Unity was no ordinary ship. Its energy signature alone had set off alarms across the galaxy, and now it was hurtling toward the heart of galactic space in defiance of every treaty and law the Council had ever written. For centuries, the Council had ruled with an iron fist, dictating the fates of countless species, from the smallest of planets to the most advanced empires. Yet here came a species from a backwater world with nothing but a single ship and a bold declaration of independence. The arrogance, the audacity of it shook even the oldest races to their core. The first fleet of ships dispatched to intercept Unity was a token response. They believed humanity was too naive, too unprepared for real conflict. They would show them the power of the Council's might. The fleet was led by a towering vessel, the Valthar, a warship of immense proportions built by the Charon, a race known for their ruthlessness in battle. They were one of the most feared empires in the galaxy. Their ships could shatter moons, and their warriors were legends of carnage. The Charon had seen the rise of many species, but none had dared defy the Council. Until now, the other ships in the fleet were smaller, but no less dangerous, a mix of alien technologies, each ship carrying its own unique firepower. As they approached Earth's warship, the fleet began to slow their pace, their commanders on high alert. They had expected to engage in a show of strength and then force humanity back into submission. Instead, what they saw was Unity gliding through the darkness of space with a calm and unhurried grace, its weapons bristling, yet not activated, its hull gleaming under the distant light of stars, as if it were not afraid of what was to come. The first shot was fired by the Valthar, a blast of energy that lit up the blackness of space and shattered the silence like a thunderclap. The shockwave rocked Unity, but the ship's shields absorbed the blast without so much as a flicker. The fleet's commanders watched in stunned disbelief, but before they could react, Unity unleashed its own fury with a single command. The ship's cannons fired in unison, sending a barrage of energy pulses that hit their mark with surgical precision. The first Charon ship was obliterated in an instant, its massive frame disintegrating into nothingness. The second ship attempted to retaliate, but it was too late. Unity's adaptive systems had already calculated the trajectory of its weapons, and the return fire tore through the second vessel's defenses in a cascade of sparks and flame. The remaining ships tried to regroup, but it was clear now to everyone that Unity was not like anything they had ever encountered. The Karen fleet's leader made the decision to retreat, but it was too late. Unity had already adapted its strategy. The last remaining ship was hit with another devastating shot, causing it to spin out of control before finally breaking apart into fragments. The silence that followed the battle was almost as deafening as the destruction itself across the galaxy. Every species, every council member had received the transmission of Unity's victory. It had been swift and brutal, but it was not a message of destruction. It was a message of power. Humanity had shown that it was not to be underestimated, and now the galaxy would have to reckon with the rise of a new force, a force that would no longer kneel before any empire, no matter how ancient or powerful. The Galactic Council convened an immediate emergency session. Every leader, every race that had once sat comfortably at the top of the galactic hierarchy was now in turmoil. The transmission from Unity had been received on every council world, and the galaxy trembled at its implications. The first reaction was disbelief. How could a species that had been so easily ignored for centuries suddenly rise up and challenge the entire structure of galactic order? The second reaction was fear that this was the beginning of something far greater than any of them had anticipated. The Council's oldest members, who had ruled the stars for millennia, gathered in the Grand Hall, their faces drawn with concern. The Charon were first to speak. Their fleet had been decimated in a matter of minutes, their best ships reduced to scrap before they even had a chance to strike back. They had sent a force they believed would easily crush humanity, and instead Unity had destroyed them with terrifying efficiency. The Charon admiral spoke in a low voice, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. The humans are not to be underestimated. He said they possess a power we do not understand, but we will not be the first to fall to it. The other council members murmured in agreement, but many of them were still reluctant to accept the new reality. There were some who refused to believe humanity had truly done what they had just seen. Others believed it was a fluke, a lucky strike that would not happen again. Yet as the minutes passed, more reports came in from the outer rim. More fleets had been turned away, more ships had been reduced to burning wreckage. Humanity had made its presence felt, and the galaxy was on edge. The Council called for action, but what action could they take? How could they confront a species that had only one ship and yet had crippled a fleet with ease? Their most powerful warships had been shown to be vulnerable to the might of Unity. What hope did they have of stopping the rise of humanity's military power? In the midst of the Council's debates, an unexpected transmission arrived. It was from the Ythak, an ancient race of scholars and warriors known for their intellectual cunning and ruthlessness. The Ythak had never been part of the Galactic Council, but they had always been considered a shadow power, a race that could never be ignored. The transmission was short and chilling. Humanity must be destroyed. The Ythak said, no one will be allowed to disrupt the balance of power the galaxy has maintained for eons. We will crush them before they can grow any further. The council leaders listened in silence as the Ythak made their declaration. It was clear they had no intention of negotiating or even acknowledging humanity's existence. They saw Earth's rise as a direct threat to their dominance, and they would stop at nothing to eliminate it. The Charon and several other races that had suffered losses in their attempts to confront Unity hesitated, but the power of the Ythak was undeniable. The council was divided, and as the hours ticked by, they began to make plans to send an emissary to Earth in an attempt to force a peace or face utter annihilation. But in the shadow of Unity, Earth had no intention of surrendering and had already taken the first step toward its own future, and that future would not be dictated by the Council or anyone else. Humanity had awakened, and it would not be silenced now. And the question was not whether the Council would act, but how soon they would realize that humanity was not just another race to be controlled, it was a force to be reckoned with. The transmission from the Ythak had set the Council into a frenzy, but even as they debated humanity's fate, Unity pressed on toward the galactic heart. The ancient civilizations that held power over the stars were scrambling to react to a challenge they had never expected from a species they had long considered insignificant. Earth was a distant world, one among many others that had failed to gain any meaningful status in galactic affairs, but now the humans had sent a warship that spoke only one language: strength and defiance, and it was clear to all who saw it that humanity would not bend to the will of the Council. As Unity crossed into the heart of galactic space, its crew watched the unfolding chaos from the command deck. The captain of the warship stood motionless before the massive viewports, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression unreadable. The decision had been made. Humanity was no longer playing by the Council's rules. They would take their place among the stars, or they would die trying, and every moment that passed brought them closer to what could either be an overwhelming victory or a cataclysmic defeat. For weeks now, Unity had traveled through space with purpose, its engines cutting through the fabric of the galaxy with brutal efficiency. And while the Council bickered and debated, Unity's progress remained uninterrupted. The ship's systems had already begun to adapt to the vast unknowns of galactic combat. They had unlocked alien technologies so advanced that it defied comprehension, and yet it was nothing more than the raw material of humanity's ingenuity and resourcefulness. Unity was a living ship, constantly evolving and adapting, and it knew only one thing: survival. As they approached the Council's homeworld, the crew of Unity prepared for the next phase of their mission. They had received intel of the Council's most powerful defenses, but they had also studied their weaknesses. It was no longer a matter of diplomacy, no longer a matter of persuasion. Unity was not a tool for negotiation. It was a symbol of humanity's power, and the galaxy would either respect that power or face the consequences. The crew was ready for the conflict ahead. They were not just soldiers, they were the vanguard of humanity's future, and they would not fail. The moment Unity crossed into the Council's protected space, the ship was met with a response that was swift and brutal. A fleet of Council warships appeared from behind the moons of a nearby planet. They were the finest ships the galaxy had ever produced, built with technology that was centuries ahead of Earth's, and yet they were now facing something they could not comprehend. They had come to destroy, but Unity was not so easily defeated. Without hesitation, Unity unleashed its weapons for the first time. The energy pulses it fired tore through the advancing fleet with terrifying accuracy. The first ship fell in an instant, its shields flickering and then collapsing under the weight of Unity's assault. The second ship fared no better, its engines overloaded before it exploded into a cloud of fragmented debris. The third ship attempted to flee, but its path was already calculated, and in the blink of an eye, Unity struck again. The fleet was scattered in disarray, and the Council's leaders were left in stunned silence as they watched their forces disintegrate in the face of humanity's might. The message had been sent, and it could not be ignored. Humanity was not weak, it was not divided, and it was no longer willing to wait for permission to take its place among the stars. But as Unity hovered above the Council's homeworld, the question remained, what would the galaxy do now that humanity had shown its power? Would they bow to the new order, or would they resist and face the consequences of underestimating a species that had only just begun to reveal its true strength? The battle of the Council's homeworld was only the beginning. The moment Unity had unleashed its power, the galaxy had felt the shift. Every race that had once looked down on humanity now understood the message Earth had sent, and it was not one of submission. Humanity was no longer the quiet backwater planet. They had been led to believe they had a weapon of unimaginable power, and they were not afraid to use it. The fleet that had engaged Unity was in shambles. The Council's defenses had crumbled under the first wave of attack, and the galaxy stood on the edge of chaos. On Unity, the crew waited in tense silence, the echoes of battle still ringing in their ears. The captain stood before the viewports, staring out at the wreckage of the Council's fleet. The stars beyond seemed distant and cold, but inside the ship, there was a fire that burned with unyielding determination. Humanity had taken its first step towards something greater, and they would not stop now. The crew was prepared for the next stage of their mission. The Council had underestimated them, and they would pay the price for their arrogance. Reports came in from across the galaxy as Unity continued its journey. The galactic powers scrambled to mount a response, but they were scattered, disorganized, and afraid. Many of the lesser races had already begun to reconsider their allegiances. They had watched Unity's victory unfold, and now they understood that humanity was no longer a species to be ignored. The older powers were not so quick to embrace this reality. They were too entrenched in their ways, their egos too large to admit that a race once considered weak had just toppled their best fleets. The ETHAC, who had sent the initial transmission declaring humanity's destruction, now moved in the shadows, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. Their ancient empire had always been a force to be reckoned with, but even they had never faced a foe like Unity. Their warships were powerful, but they were old, and their technology was beginning to show signs of decay. They had ruled for so long that they believed themselves invincible, but humanity was different, and that was something the ETHAC could not comprehend. Back in the council chambers, the leaders of the remaining fleets debated their next move. The room was filled with voices, each race representing their own interests. Some called for immediate retaliation against Unity, while others suggested a more cautious approach. But the truth was that no one knew how to stop humanity's rise. The balance of power had shifted, and the council's once unchallenged authority was now in question. The humans had shown them that there were limits to their power, and they had just reached it. The Council finally sent out a fleet, one of their largest, to confront Unity, but they were not prepared for what was to come. The humans had learned from their previous battles, and they had adapted. Unity was a living ship constantly evolving, and it had already calculated the Council's moves before they had even made them. The new fleet that arrived was met with a storm of firepower. Unity's weapons tore through their shields with pinpoint accuracy, and within minutes the fleet was scattered in retreat. The message was clear now. Humanity was no longer the underdog. They were a force to be reckoned with, and as Unity hovered above the Council's homeworld, once more the leaders who had once ruled the galaxy knew that things would never be the same again. The rise of humanity had only just begun, and there was no going back. Just as humanity's victory over the Council seemed inevitable, a new threat emerged from the shadows. The ETHAC had waited long enough, and now they were ready to act with cold precision. Their empire was ancient and vast, stretching across star systems that were the bedrock of galactic civilization. For centuries, They had stayed out of the council's politics, watching with detached amusement, as the younger races bickered and warred among themselves, but now humanity had upset the balance, and the Ythak would not let that pass unchallenged. The Ythak were not like the other races. They were an ancient race of intellectuals and warriors. Their empire had once stood at the pinnacle of galactic power before a catastrophic civil war fractured their hold on the stars. They had retreated into the shadows from where they had quietly manipulated the galaxy's politics for millennia with cunning and patience. Now they had seen enough, and they would not allow humanity to rise without consequence. The first move came in the form of a surprise assault on Earth itself. Unity had only just returned from its victory against the Council, and a fleet of Ythak warships emerged from a hidden sector of space and attacked the human homeworld. The Ythak warships were unlike anything humanity had encountered before. Their sleek designs were built for stealth and precision, their weapons capable of bypassing Unity's shields with devastating effect. The first barrage sent Unity reeling, but the ship was far from defenseless. It retaliated with overwhelming force, sending a wave of energy pulses toward the approaching fleet. The battle raged for hours above the Earth's surface as the Ythak pressed forward with relentless determination. Back on Unity, the crew fought with everything they had. The captain barked orders as the ship's systems adapted to the unexpected assault. Every strike from the Ythak was met with countermeasures as Unity adjusted its shields and weapons to match the enemy's tactics, but the Ythak were relentless and their numbers seemed endless. Meanwhile, on Earth, leaders from across the galaxy watched in horror as humanity's enemies closed in on the homeworld. The Council had been silent since the first wave of attacks, but the Ythak were a different kind of threat. They were not concerned with diplomacy or peace. They had already declared their intent to destroy humanity once and for all. As Unity fought for survival, the Ythak began their advance to Earth's surface, preparing for an invasion that would wipe humanity from existence. If they succeeded, it would be the end of the human race. In the midst of the chaos, there were whispers among the Council factions who had once opposed humanity's rise now began to reconsider their positions. Some saw the potential for an alliance with the humans against the greater Ythak threat, while others feared the Ythak would destroy everything in their path before humanity could fully establish its place in the galaxy. These divided factions were left at a crossroads with the fate of both humanity and the galaxy hanging in the balance. On Unity, the crew continued to push back against the Ythak fleet, but their efforts were beginning to show signs of strain. The ship had taken heavy damage, and its systems were beginning to flicker. As the onslaught continued, the captain knew time was running out. They had to find a way to stop the Ythak before Earth was lost, but how could they stand against such an ancient and powerful force? Even Unity seemed to be struggling against the sheer ferocity of the attack, and for the first time since humanity had risen, the possibility of defeat began to creep into the minds of those who had once believed victory was certain. As the Ythak fleet closed in on Earth, Unity's systems were beginning to fail. The relentless assault had pushed the warship to its limits. Its shields were weakening, its weapon systems were overloaded, and the crew was exhausted. But despite everything they had endured, the captain refused to give in. The Ythak had underestimated humanity once, and they would not make that mistake again. Unity would not fall, and Earth would not be lost. The battle above Earth had turned into a brutal contest of attrition. The Ythak were not giving an inch. Their warships were like shadows moving swiftly and striking with precision. They had studied humanity's tactics and adapted quickly. Their energy weapons bypassed Unity's defenses, and their advanced stealth systems made them difficult to track. But humanity had one advantage. The Ythak did not understand the resilience of a species that had survived against all odds. The crew of Unity fought not just for victory, but for their very survival, for the future of their species, for the right to stand among the stars as equals, and they would not let that future slip away without a fight. Inside the command center, the crew worked feverishly to adapt to the changing tide of the battle. Orders were shouted from every corner of the room. The ship's officers raced to reroute power to critical systems, but it was clear the situation was dire. The Ythak were relentless, and their fleet was growing larger by the minute. Reinforcements were on the way, and Unity could not hold out forever. Just as hope began to wane, a new message arrived from the Council. It was a diplomatic overture, an offer of an alliance between humanity and the Council's factions who had seen the danger of the Ythak and realized the threat they posed to the entire galaxy. The message was brief, but the implications were enormous. If humanity agreed to join forces with those who once considered them inferior, they could combine their strengths to confront the Ythak and perhaps even turn the tide of the war. But the captain of Unity was not so sure. Humanity had fought too long to secure its place in the galaxy, to simply become another pawn in the Council's game. The Council had already shown their true colors, and while the offer of alliance was tempting, it felt like a trap. The Ythak were the real enemy, and they had to be dealt with first. The captain turned to his officers and gave the order to push forward. They would face the Ythak head-on, and they would either defeat them or perish in the attempt. With renewed determination, Unity surged forward into the heart of the Ethak fleet, unleashing a barrage of firepower that sent shockwaves through the enemy lines. The Ethak were caught off guard, their warships staggered under the assault, but they quickly regrouped and retaliated with even greater ferocity. The battle was now a desperate struggle for survival. Both sides fought with everything they had, but the odds were overwhelming and humanity's hope was fading with every passing moment. As the battle reached its climax, the captain of Unity made a final daring decision. They would risk everything in one final strike. Unity's core was powerful beyond imagination. Its energy source was a force that could shatter star systems, and it had been calibrated to deliver a cataclysmic blow that would destroy the heart of the Ethak fleet once and for all, but using it meant sacrificing the warship itself. The captain made the call, the crew braced for the impact, and the ship's core hummed to life with a devastating energy pulse that ripped through the Ethak formation. Like a supernova, the explosion was blinding. It tore through the heart of the fleet, annihilating dozens of Ethak warships in an instant. But the cost was great. Unity shuddered and began to break apart, its systems overloaded and the hull cracked under the strain. As the captain and crew prepared for the end, they knew they had done the impossible. They had delivered the final blow to the Ethak and saved Earth, but the price of victory might have been their lives. As the shockwave of Unity's final strike rippled across space, the silence that followed was deafening. The remnants of the Ethak fleet drifted lifelessly through the black void, their once proud warships shattered beyond recognition. The energy pulse had torn through their defenses like paper and left nothing but the echoes of destruction behind. But Unity had paid a heavy price for its victory. The ship's core was destabilizing and its systems were failing rapidly. The captain stood at the helm as the warship began to break apart. The crew was silent, their eyes focused on the view screens as the stars beyond the hull flickered and dimmed. But just as all seemed lost, the unthinkable happened. A fleet of ships appeared out of nowhere. They were sleek and fast, their hulls shining with a bright metallic gleam, their weapons poised for battle. But as they neared the damaged Unity, they made no aggressive moves. Instead, their ships came into view and revealed their insignia, the symbol of the United Species Coalition, a faction that had remained neutral throughout the earlier conflicts of the Council and had watched the rise of humanity from a distance. They had watched Unity strike down the Ethak, and they had seen the battle unfold from the fringes of the galaxy, and now they were here to help. The captain of Unity was stunned as the leader of the Coalition's fleet hailed them with an urgent transmission. The Ethak are gone, the leader said, and humanity has won, but your ship is critical. We need to get you out of here before Unity falls apart completely. You have earned your place in the galaxy, and we will not allow it to be destroyed in the final moments of the war. The crew was stunned as the message sank in. Humanity had not only defeated the Ethak, but had now earned the respect of a major galactic power. The Coalition had arrived to save them and secure their place among the stars. But as the captain and the officers of Unity exchanged glances, the question remained: would they accept the offer or would they push forward alone? As the Coalition fleet moved into Tau Unity towards safety, the crew of the warship watched their homeworld grow closer on the viewscreen. Earth was safe for now. The Ethak threat had been neutralized, and the galaxy had taken notice of humanity's strength. Unity had fought against the odds, and now Earth's place in the stars was secure. But there was still much work to be done. The Council's authority was fractured, the galaxy was in a state of flux, and the power vacuum left by the Ethak was vast and unclaimed. The captain stood before the crew and addressed them one final time. Humanity had won, but the fight for its future had only just begun. They had earned their place, but now it was time to define what that place would be. The galaxy was no longer an unchallenged realm of ancient powers. It was a new frontier where humanity would carve its own path. With that, the captain gave the order Unity would be towed to a safe station for repairs. But humanity's journey was far from over. The Council would have to adapt to a new reality. The other galactic factions would have to reckon with the rising power of Earth, and the captain knew that the next phase of their struggle would be just as uncertain as the one they had just survived. But humanity would not turn back. It would press forward and establish its own future among the stars. And as Unity drifted toward the Coalition fleet, the crew exchanged glances and knew without a word that they had just begun to write the next chapter of humanity's story in the stars.